All right, could I have your attention, please? Thank you, and good afternoon. It is now afternoon on the dot, and really grateful that all of you could be here. And we're very excited about our partnership with Silver Bridges Consulting. They have worked with a number of different financial advisors and are a resource in our community to our clients. And we're really excited to have them share a little bit about things that we ought to be thinking about while we're healthy and independent and just navigating that those final years and what that might look like. So I'm very excited to introduce Ginger Noche and Christy Kennedy, and they're going to take it from here. Please give them a big welcome. But before you do, please help yourself to some more food, some more dessert throughout. That'll be out throughout the duration. The yellow cake is delicious. I didn't have the chocolate. That was good. Please go ahead and make sure you get some dessert as well. All right, thank you. Sorry.
All right. Thank you. Well, we are so glad to be here today. So I'm Christy, and this is Ginger. We often forget to tell people that, so we want to make sure you know who's who. Please, as Jim said, if you want to get up, get more food, if you need to use the restroom, please do not hesitate to do that during this presentation. You're more than welcome to. And just before I get started, I would like for everybody to just give yourself a round of applause for actually being here and being proactive about thinking about planning what your next step might look like. Yeah, that is the one thing that we tell folks more than anything is to have a plan. It is just so vitally important. So glad you're all here and getting this information. Just to give you a little bit about our background, if you can't hear me, please just raise your hand. I can try to project more. So I have been in senior living for over 20 years. I spent 10 years of my career as a regional leader with one of the top 5 providers in the country. And from there, I was with a company where we did things with remote sensor technology and senior living. The last organization I was with, we were in St. Louis, Missouri. We're in over 1,000 communities across 40 states. So been in this business for quite a while. And we actually started our company because at the time I was on and off airplanes all the time, was getting really weary of air travel. And then with Ginger, her background, Ginger comes to this more from 25 years of executive leadership experience, and also having been a caregiver, a long distance caregiver for her parents. We live in Washington, D.C. Her parents lived in Roanoke, Virginia. Dad was 86, mom was 83, trying to take care of mom who had early stage dementia. And it was just like watching a train wreck. We tried to get him to move out of that house. He was going to stay there. He was going to take care of her, and that's what he was going to do. And he did. He lived his life the way he wanted to. Unfortunately, he suffered a fall there in the house, never recovered from it, and passed away. So we were left then in this situation of what's the best thing for Ginger's mom? And so in looking at that, we were trying to decide, is it better to move her to the Washington, D.C. area where we live? Is it better to move her to Florida where Ginger's sister is? We knew we didn't want to have her in Roanoke. So what made the most sense? And so just helping walk them through this, Ginger and her sister looked at me one day and they said, how do people do this? This is freaking hard. Like, it is really hard to figure this out. And they said, if they don't have somebody like you, what do they do? And so we started just sort of looking at, how do people navigate this journey? What are the resources available to them? And what we realized is that people need someone who is their advocate, first and foremost, who's going to advocate for them on their behalf throughout this entire process. Our goal with folks is to educate them and empower them with the information that they need so they can really make the best decision either for themselves or for a loved one. So just really, really important. We understand because of, with Ginger's family having gone through this, we understand the emotions. This is probably one of the most personal decisions people have to make. We understand the emotions that go along with this and how challenging it can be. So we're really there to guide people and hold your hand through this. How many of you have heard from or heard about a company called A Place for Mom? Okay, the way A Place for Mom works is they are the largest marketing engine in senior living. So a number of senior living communities, not nearly all of them, but a portion of them have contracts with A Place for Mom. So what happens is if you call A Place for Mom and you're trying to get some information about communities you might want to visit, their call center has now been moved to India. They will get about 5 minutes worth of information from you, and then they get your name, your phone number, and your email address. They will send you a list of 10 communities that meet your needs, or what they think are your needs. And then they give your name and your email and your phone number to those 10 communities. So now you start getting phone calls about coming in for a tour. We've got pricing promotions going on. When are you going to come visit? It is I worked with them very closely when I was in the senior living industry. And it is a very bad experience for consumers. It is just not what they need. A Place for Mom is paid because somebody moved into a community that they recommended. They only recommend communities that pay them. So if they're great communities that are close to you, you're never going to see them if A Place for Mom doesn't have a contract with that community. So we are agnostic as far as which communities we refer to. We refer to the community that is best for our clients, regardless of whether they pay a referral fee, because our relationship is with our clients. All right, with this too, we spend about 45 hours with every family that we help. So we're very high touch, very hands-on, really shepherding you through this journey, not just of identifying, okay, what are the best communities for me based off my geography, my budget, my wants, my needs, my likes, but also really understanding what communities are operationally sound, which ones have the infrastructure in place, the staffing in place, the state licensure, all of those things in order to really provide great care should you need that. All right, we're going to start out today. I want to give you an overview of senior living, and just sort of help you understand what's happening in this whole industry. So right now, as of today, there are about 30,600 senior living communities across the U.S. And this will make sense as we go through this, but about 2,200 of those, a much smaller subset, are what are called continuing care retirement communities. The rest of those communities are rental communities or group homes. So much larger share of rental communities and group homes in the country than there are CCRCs. And we're seeing a lot of new development that's happening because of what's happening with the aging baby boomers. A lot more rental communities being built than CCRCs, the larger, more expansive, because it is a smaller footprint. By the year 2030, 1 in 6 people are actually going to be over the age of 60. And that is in the world. This is not only something happening here in the United States, this is happening across the entire world. By 2034, the older adults are actually going to outnumber those folks that are 18 and under for the first time in US history. And I read something a couple weeks ago that said beginning the end of this year and then going through the end of 2027, there will be 12,000 people a day turning 65. So for the next 2 years. So you can really see that we're kind of getting to the pinnacle of what's happening here. The other thing that's interesting to share with you is when you look at inventory within senior living availability, all the projections are saying that we are probably going to be about 320,000 apartments or units short of what people are going to need over the next 4 to 5 years, because senior living just can't build communities fast enough. So right now you may be seeing wait list if you're looking at communities, especially in some of the CCRCs. We don't see that as much in the rental community side, but I think we're going to start to see more of that as time progresses. If you put a pin, so we live in Northwest DC, and if you put a pin in where we are and drew a circle around us, in that area alone, there are over 100 senior living communities. The same is true in Philadelphia. The same is true in many of the major metropolitan areas. They are getting incredibly saturated, and it's hard because of that to separate, okay, who are the really good providers and who are the ones that maybe aren't so good and don't do such a great job. So the types of senior living options we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about continuing care retirement communities, also known as life plan communities. So if you hear those words, they really are the same thing. These are the large campuses that spread multiple acres. And on the campus, they're going to have independent living, assisted living, memory care, and skilled nursing, all on that campus, usually in separate buildings, but it's all available there. So it's really that continuum of care. We're also going to talk about rental communities. And what's interesting about rental communities is they can be divided across different service lines. You may have a rental community that offers independent living, assisted living, and memory care, or it may be just assisted living and memory care. It could be a standalone memory care community where that's really all they do and specialize in. Or it can be what I mentioned earlier, these group homes. Group homes are essentially, it looks like a home. You almost wouldn't even know it if you were driving by in a neighborhood that has been retrofitted to take care of older adults. They are by state licensing and state law only allowed to have 8 residents max that live in those homes. So it's typically assisted living and memory care. But there are a number of those that are around and more that are popping up as we go. They are actually regulated differently than the other part of the senior living world, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Okay, so with life plan communities, as I mentioned, this is the large campus model with all of those different services on that campus, from independent living through to skilled nursing. You do have to be 62 years or older to qualify. They have various room styles. So whether you're looking for a 1-bedroom apartment or a 3-bedroom apartment, 2.5 bath with den, they have those as well. So these can be really large in square footage. There's actually one in our market. They have apartments that are 3,200 square feet. So as large as some folks' home. So you may not be downsizing in some cases as much as you thought, but lots of options to choose from. All of these communities are also going to have on-site physical, occupational, and speech therapy, which is wonderful. Even if you move in independent and you don't need it, having it on site is so much easier for you to be compliant with that. If you only have to get in an elevator and go down a couple floors to be at therapy versus getting in your car and having to drive somewhere. And then most of these communities are going to have physicians that come on site to see the residents. Typically, it's going to be a primary care physician, and some of the larger CCRCs may have 3, 4, 5 doctors that come in. You do want to keep your specialists though, so they're not going to have cardiology, neurology, and those types of folks. But they will have other visiting physicians like audiology, podiatry, dentistry, and dermatology, and sometimes psychiatry as well that'll come in and see the residents. So just making it easy with bringing those services to the community. Lots of amenities at these CCRC or life plan communities because they are catering to that independent population. So you're going to see indoor and outdoor swimming pools, you'll see tennis courts, bocce ball, all kinds of things that are available there. About 5 to 8 activities a day are offered. Now, the good news is you can be as busy as you want to be. You're not required to participate in anything, but what's nice is as we get older, and this is true for all of us, our social circle can tend to shrink. Either our friends move away, our friends pass away, and before we know it, our social circle has gotten really small. Living in a community helps facilitate keeping that social circle broad. And it makes participating in activities and doing things that are of interest to you, or maybe you didn't even know are of interest to you, it makes that really easy. Most of the communities are pet friendly. So if you have a dog or a cat, you don't have to leave them behind. Some communities will have a weight limit of 25 to 35 pounds. Some don't have a weight limit at all. So pets, they love having pets, they're actually welcome. And then most of these communities will provide free transportation within 5 to 10 miles of the community. So that would be transportation to a doctor's appointment, to the grocery store. They'll do transportation and take folks to museums, presentations, outings, all kinds of things. That is scheduled usually through a concierge at the community, but it is available. And then certainly you can bring your car. Many communities provide parking for free. Some will charge for parking, a monthly rate, but you absolutely can bring your car. I will tell you a funny story though. We were at a community and they were having a hard time finding enough parking spaces for all the residents. And so they decided that they were going to go around the parking lot, and this was a huge CCRC. They were going to go around the parking lot and see how many license plates had expired. So they went around and they found out of 37 cars that were there, 25 that had expired license plates. So they went back to the residents and said, hey, just want to let you know your car had a flat tire, the license plate's expired, don't know if you want to do anything with it. And some of the residents said, oh my gosh, I forgot I even brought a car, because they were just using the transportation at the community so much, they really didn't even miss their car. So they do make these. Now, this model is private pay. If you had to go into skilled nursing, your skilled nursing Medicare will kick in to cover a portion of that should you need those services. Also, things like physical, occupational, and speech therapy, those are going to be covered under your Medicare Part B. Otherwise, everything else is going to be private pay. With the CCRC model, so when you look at, we're going to talk about rental communities after this, but when you look at CCRCs and you look at rental communities, this is where they get different, is in this pricing structure. So with a CCRC or a life plan community, you're paying a large upfront entrance fee. Now that entrance fee can range anywhere from about $200,000 for a smaller one-bedroom apartment, all the way up to, we've seen it at $5.5 million in our market for a very large apartment. That is your entrance fee. So think about that like a country club entrance fee that you're paying. When you move out, whether you decide to move out or whether you pass away and the money goes back to your estate, a portion of that entrance fee is refunded to you. Now, the portion that's refunded to you depends on the contract that you sign. Communities have different contracts. Some are 50% refundable, some 70%, 80%, and 90%. You don't necessarily get to choose that. Most communities have one, maybe two options. We've seen one community that has 4 options, which is very unusual, but usually it's either 70%, 80%, 90%. That money is refunded to your estate when you pass away. And then in addition to paying that entrance fee, you're also paying a monthly service fee. Now, the monthly service fee basically is covering your meal plan, access to all the amenities, everything else there at the community you'd be utilizing. That monthly service fee is anywhere between about $3,000 to $6,000 per month per person. With these communities, as well as with rental communities, you're going to see about a 5 to 6% cost of living increase. That's going to be pretty standard. We do see some communities that are 2 to 3%. We see others that are 5%. During COVID, I will share with you, we saw these up to about 12%, which was just horrible. Thank goodness they've come down and leveled out. So about 5 to 6% is the average. And then we're not going to spend a lot of time on this today, but in the life care model, there are a number of different types of contracts. So there's a type A, a type B, which is a modified, a type C, which is a fee for service. And then there's also an equity and a co-op model. This could literally be another hour presentation about contract types, but it's really important with CCRCs. Kind of the most important thing with this, if you want to move into a continuing care retirement community, you have to do it while you're still independent. Most of these communities require that in order to move in, you have to medically qualify that you can live independently for at least the next 2 to 3 years, and you have to financially qualify that you can afford to stay there and pay what you need to pay. So many CCRCs will have waiting lists that can be 1 to 3 years, especially if you're looking for a larger apartment. No surprise, those always go first. You can typically get on that waiting list for $1,000 refundable deposit. Getting on that waiting list at least secures you a place in line. If they have something become available, they'll call you. If you're not ready, you say, I'm not ready. They'll go to the next person. You don't fall off the list, which is really nice. But if you're looking at a CCRC, a life plan community, there are not many that allow you to plug into, oh, I just want to move into the assisted living, or I just want to move into the memory care. You usually 90% of the time have to come in through independent living and then go through the continuum as an independent living resident. So really, really important to remember. Independent living typically is going to include about a meal per day per person as part of that monthly service fee you're paying. So 20 to 30 meals a month is usually what you see that's included. Most people take that meal as dinner because it's the more social meal at the community. If you move into assisted living or memory care, and this is going to be true across any community in any state, if you move into assisted living or memory care, by law, they are required to provide 3 meals a day, daily housekeeping, weekly house cleaning, laundry once a week, access to all the activities, as well as transportation. So those are part of any assisted living and memory care community. That's part of what you're paying for. As far as regulations go, what's really interesting, and another thing that just makes this whole thing confusing for people is, unlike skilled nursing is regulated by Medicare. So if you're looking for a skilled nursing community, you can go online and look to see how many stars was that skilled nursing rated. They use a 5-star rating system, with 5 being the best, 1 being terrible. And they show you the different metrics they rate those facilities on. So that makes it at least a little bit easier. Skilled nursing has the national regulating body. Senior living is all licensed by state. It's all individual by state. The regulations are different by state. Typically, the licensing agent, excluding independent living and CCRCs, which is regulated by the Bureau of Insurance for that state, assisted living and memory care are all regulated by either the Department of Health, the Department of Social Services, or some version of those departments within that organization. And typically the communities, the assisted living and memory care, they inspect those communities about at least once a year. They would do that more if there were complaints and problems. But when they inspect it, the important thing for you to take away from this piece of the conversation is an inspector comes into the community. It's an unannounced visit. Staff does not know they're coming. They know a window of when they're coming. That inspector spends about 2 to 3 days on site, and they go through everything. They look at resident files, they look at care plans, they look at how care is delivered, they look at the dining program, food quality, you name it, that inspector looks at it. They can give those communities what's called a deficiency. So if that community is doing something outside of state regulations, they can be dinged for that or penalized for that. With that deficiency, this is all public knowledge. All of these state inspections are available online. The hard part is, number one, to find them, because you have to know who the regulating body is. And then the second tricky part with this is, when you do find them, how do you make sense of that actual report? Because it's written in very senior living, sometimes very clinical terms, especially if it's around like medication management or care. So it can be very challenging. That's one thing we look at on behalf of our clients. But if you are looking at communities, I would encourage you to try to hunt this information down. There is, in Maryland, they do require that you send an email to get that information. Most other states, you can actually see it online. But please, please, if you're considering senior living options, look to see how they've done on that state survey. Very important. The other thing I'll share with you on that is, if a community has a deficiency, first of all, it doesn't disqualify it and mean it's a bad community. So a deficiency could be something as simple as the inspector was going through paperwork and they saw a resident failed to sign a fire escape plan. That could be a deficiency because the signature was missing on an important document. Or it could be something as severe as there was a reported case of resident abuse that they're there inspecting. Or they had a resident elope and they're there inspecting that. So just because there's a deficiency, look to see what it is and how much of a red flag that really is. All right. We are going to move forward and pivot now to rental communities. So rental communities are going to be different from CCRCs in 2 ways. Number one, they don't have skilled nursing on site, but there are lots and lots of skilled nursing facilities, and we'll talk about why someone would need to go to skilled nursing. And then secondly, the pricing structure is different. The other thing that we see a lot, and would encourage you to do this, if you are going to look at a CCRC or a life plan community and you're going in as independent living, which you 90% of the time have to do, please make sure you ask, can I please take a tour of the assisted living and of the memory care? CCRC's bread and butter is independent living. They put a lot of money into the independent living side of the community. Sometimes, and this is not all the time, but in a number of cases, when we're looking at communities for clients, we'll go and look at the assisted living and memory care, and it looks very much like skilled nursing. It looks like a nursing home, or very much more clinical. It's not as residential. It's not nearly as nice. So it's just important that you understand the look and the feel as you go through that care continuum. Are you or your loved one going to be happy in that environment? There are some rental communities where you cannot tell the difference whether you're in independent living or whether you're in memory care. They're just as beautiful. They have the same finishes. They have the same residential look and feel. There is absolutely no difference to it whatsoever. So with this, rental communities, it's just important to know, okay, what services do they offer? Can I go in an independent? Do they have assisted? And then do they have memory care? So what are the services available? Same type of room styles from a 1-bedroom to a 3-bedroom. Many are gonna have that same on-site physical, occupational, and speech therapy we talked about, as are they going to have the visiting physicians. They will have a primary care doctor or nurse practitioner that comes on site to see the residents. You are more than welcome to keep your own doctor. You are not required to take on the physician at that community. What does happen though, in about 70 to 80% of the cases, is residents do start seeing that on-site doctor simply because it makes coordination of care so much easier. And what I mean by that is, if, let's say, you move into a CCRC and you start having an issue with congestion or something in the middle of the night, and you don't see that house doctor. You now have to wait till the next day, schedule an appointment to see your doctor, go to the doctor, they write your prescription, you go to CVS, pick up the prescription, and then you go back to the apartment. Versus if you're seeing that house doctor, they can engage with that nurse there at the community and say, hey, I think we need to get this medication started. They can call in that prescription immediately, get it delivered to the community, and get you on it much more quickly. So it just makes it a lot easier from a coordination care standpoint. Same types of visiting physicians at these communities with the audiology, the podiatry, the dentistry, the psychiatry, they're all going to come in as well. Same amenities you're going to see at rental communities, they're just not going to be as broad, because CCRCs are much bigger campuses. They're going to have anywhere from 400 to 2,500 people that live there. Rental communities are typically going to be smaller in scale, so you're not going to have the same scope of amenities, but they will have swimming pools, they will have pickleball, they will have movie theaters, on-site hair salons, massage, all of those types of services are offered as well. Same number of activities, they're pet friendly as well, and then they're going to provide the free transportation also. So here's where the differences again begin to become apparent. This is also a private pay option, but instead of that big entrance fee we talked about before in a continuing care or life plan community that was anywhere from $200,000 to $5 million, here you're paying what's called a community fee. So this is a one-time non-refundable fee. It's sort of like a security deposit. You don't get it back when you move out, but they use that money when you do move out to refurbish that apartment. They're going to put in new carpet, new appliances, paint it, whatever needs to be done. That community fee is between $3,000 up to a high side. The highest we've seen is about $50,000. And that's for one of the high-end luxury communities. But that is a one-time fee that you pay, not refundable. And that is for a couple. You don't pay that same fee for two people. Then you have your monthly fee. And your monthly fee is based off how large the apartment is, where it's located, the view, all those types of things. Your monthly fee in a rental community is going to be a little bit higher than it is in the life plan community, although your upfront fee is going to be significantly less. So your monthly fee is going to be between about $4,000 to $12,000 at a base level. That's without getting any care, typically. In assisted living and memory care, you're going to have care charges. And this can be true in the CCRC model as well, unless you have what's called a type A contract with CCRCs and you're under a life care model. Otherwise, you're going to see care charges that go into play when you go into assisted living and memory care. So the amount of care that you get determines that level. The more care you need, the higher that rate goes. We'll talk about this a little bit more. Other thing that you may have is a medication management charge when you move to assisted living and memory care. So in order to manage your own medications in a senior living environment, you have to be able to answer the following questions. What is the medication I take? What do I take it for? How often do I take it? And what happens if I miss a dose? So the nurse would do an assessment, ask you those questions. If you can answer those questions, you can manage your own medications. If you can't answer those questions, you go on what is called the medication management program at that community. And essentially what that means is they manage your medications for you. Either a medication technician or an LPN will distribute those medications to you when you need them. They'll come to your room. They'll give you the medications you need at the appropriate time. They handle the refills, they handle all of that for you. So they're really responsible for making sure you get your meds. And then the last piece is continence management. If folks are in continent, communities will have programs where you can purchase supplies for them, or you can buy those at Amazon and have them there in bulk and just have the staff use those. So in that monthly fee we talked about with the rental model, which is between 4 to 12 a month, depending on the size of room that you have, that's going to include about 1 to 2 meals a day. And that's pretty standard across the board in these communities. Again, with assisted living, memory care, same across the country. In every community, they have to provide the 3 meals a day, the weekly housekeeping, the linens, or the laundry, the activities, all of those things are included. And then this is the other part that gets really confusing for me. Care levels are not the same at almost any community. Unless it's a chain operator, a company that has a lot of different senior living communities, but owned by the same group, they will tend to have similar care levels. Otherwise, outside of that, care level pricing is determined by that community. So they may have 4 care levels, they may have 12 care levels. It really depends on the community. The other important thing to remember here is not all communities provide the highest level of care. So really, really important when you're looking at senior living options to ask, what could happen to me that would cause me to have to move out? So some communities do not provide what is called a 2-person assist, meaning that if I needed 2 people to help me get from my chair here to my bed, some communities don't do that. So it's really important to find out how high a level of care do they provide, because you don't want to move in somewhere, have a loved one moved in somewhere, and then as their health deteriorates, they now have to move out. It is just a horrible situation. Many communities also offer something called respite stays, which people aren't often aware of. So a respite stay is a great option for 2 reasons. Number one, if you are a caregiver and you're taking care of someone, that is, first of all, hats off to you, because from experience, that is one of the hardest jobs in the world. So if you're a caregiver and you just need a break, please take care of yourself. Statistics show that about 40% of caregivers pass away before the person they're caring for. So the stress of that job is unrelenting. Respite stays are a great way for the caregiver to get a break. They can move their loved one into a senior living community. They can be there for, some communities do it for 2 weeks. Some require a 30-day minimum up to a 60-day maximum. Great way to get some rest, recharge your own batteries, because none of us can pour from an empty cup. We need to make sure we're taking care of ourselves to give to others. So that's the first reason for respites. Second reason is some people will use this as an option to kind of kick the tires and say, hey, what is it like to live in this community? What is the food like? What are the people like? What are the activities like? How does it feel to be in this community? If you want to move in as a respite stay for 30 to 60 days, you can do that. And then decide whether you want to become a more full-time resident. So certainly an option. All right, with care rooms, I want to give you this information just as a way to think about this. So please remember, every community, if you're looking at communities, are not going to just have 4 care rooms. This is just a primer for you to say, these are the 4 buckets that care level pricing fits into. So your base level is really, if you're moving in, and these, again, only apply to assisted living and memory care, because by definition, if you're independent, you're not needing care. So base level is where you move into a community. Some folks move into assisted living. They don't want to cook anymore. They don't want to clean. They don't want to deal with housework. They don't want to deal with any of those things. So they'll move into an assisted living community. So they're there in a safe environment. They have all those things provided. That's your base level. Your level 1 is where you may need what are called cueing and reminders. And that is just trying to help keep somebody on task throughout the day. So it's time, Mr. Jones, it's time for dinner. I'd love to escort you to the dining room. Or, hey, there's a great activity going on. Why don't you come and go with me? So really helping someone stay on task. Level 2 is where a resident needs what is called standby assistance. So this is where the caregiver is in their apartment. They're there to support them, but they're not physically helping them do what are called the activities of daily living. ADLs may be an abbreviation you've heard, but activities of daily living consist of bathing, dressing, grooming, and meal preparation are getting to and from the dining room. If the staff is only there to support somebody with that and provide reminders and maybe get the shower running or help them pick out their clothes, that would be more of a level 2. Level 3 is where you're getting the assistance of one caregiver who's actually supporting you with getting dressed, taking a shower. And then level 4 is where you need the assistance of 2 caregivers. Now, Ginger's mom, when she lived in memory care, she was not a large person. She was maybe 135 pounds. But because of the disease process, her body-brain disconnect was in full swing, and she wasn't able to, her brain couldn't communicate with her legs as to really how to use them. So she needed people to move her from one place to another. So that happens often to folks, especially with memory impairment, but it's really, really important to know if the communities you're looking at provide that higher level of care, because it does require a higher level of staffing, and it requires a higher level of training, because they use things that are called mechanical lifts or Hoyer lifts to move someone if they can't do it without risk of injury. So with care levels, if you're comparing communities, just know it's typically not going to be apples to apples comparisons unless you're looking at the same amounts. All right, there are a couple conditions here that can keep you from being able to move into an assisted living environment. These are state regulations. This is not community specific. So anyone that is on a ventilator cannot be in a skilled nursing, cannot be in an assisted living setting. They have to be in skilled nursing. If you're getting an IV, that requires that you're in skilled nursing. If you develop a skin wound that is a stage 3 or 4, which are the more severe ones, that requires skilled nursing. Or if you are on a feeding tube, that requires that you be in skilled nursing. So sometimes people can be in assisted living, develop one of these conditions, have some kind of a skin wound, go to skilled nursing and have that condition resolved, and then move back into assisted living. So people can go back and forth if they happen to develop one. With memory care, this is an area where there are a lot of inconsistencies or myths about what people believe. Just because someone has a diagnosis of dementia or mild cognitive impairment does not mean they need to live in a memory care setting. There are plenty of people who are living in assisted living, and they are what I like to call pleasantly confused. So they have some confusion. They aren't trying to exit, seek, and leave the building. They're not a harm to themselves or others, and they don't need to be in a secure setting. So memory care is a secure setting that is keypadded to enter and exit. You do have to have a physician's signature in order to live in memory care, for them saying, yes, this is the best environment for this person. Reasons people move to memory care are 3. Number 1, they would be exit seeking, meaning they're trying to physically leave the community. If that community is on a busy street and they get out that front door, they could be in big trouble. So exit seeking, usually memory care is the best place for folks. If they develop repetitive behaviors where they continue to do something over and over again and it requires staff redirection, sometimes memory care is also the best setting for that. And then the third reason is folks can be living in assisted living and move in there and be doing great. And then over time, you just notice they start to become more reclusive. They're not really participating in activities. They're not really communicating as much. That environment can sometimes become overwhelming, and they do better in a smaller memory care setting. Some communities have what is called a bridge program. If you're working or if you have a loved one who has any kind of memory impairment that's early stage, bridge programs can be phenomenal. Ginger's mom was actually in one, and it was amazing to us. And I've been in this business a long time, but her mom was living at home. Her dad was doing the very best he could to take care of her and doing a good job. But they never saw, their world was very, very small. And so she moved into this bridge program, and it is a program specific to folks with early cognitive decline. It's very programmatically based. There's a lot of stimulation as part of this program. It helps to delay the decline of the disease. So Ginger's mom, when she moved up closer to DC, we got her in a bridge program. And I kid you not, it was like watching water getting poured on a wilted flower. She just blossomed. And she looked at Ginger one day and she said, you know what? I'm living my best life. And Ginger thought, well, that's great, but I don't think Dad would want to hear that. But she really did. She did incredibly well in that setting. And it does help to delay the disease process because there is a lot of stimulation and engagement that's happening. So again, not a lot of communities offer that, but some certainly do. So if you have a loved one with any kind of early cognitive decline, it's a great thing to look at. Skilled nursing, just want to spend a minute on this. So as I mentioned before, there are tons of skilled nursing community or facility. We call those facilities, we call senior living communities. So tons of skilled nursing facilities. They have that 5-star rating we talked about. Really, there are two types. Skilled nursing is used when you're coming out of the hospital, you either had surgery, you had an illness, you need more time to get back to your baseline. You may go to short-term, go to skilled nursing, get some rehab, and then be able to go back home or back to the senior living community. There are also long-term care beds, and those are for folks who have those more chronic health conditions that really require that long-term skilled care in order to continue to thrive. So two different options there. Looking at skilled nursing, again, Medicare is going to cover a portion of this, depending on how long you're in there and how many times throughout the year. But cost-wise, you're looking at, for a private room, about $10,000. For a semi-private room, it's about $8,500. A lot more places have semi-private rooms than privates. Thank goodness we're starting to see more private rooms come online than we have, which is great. But just to give you an idea of cost, that's what you're looking at. Looking at there. All right, enough of me talking. I'm going to turn this over to Ginger.
Done, Steve. Nice job. Thank you. Talk about funding senior living. You're in the right group, right? You're with the experts here in the room, and thank you to Admit for having us here today. So folks ask us, all the time, how am I going to fund this? And you guys have talked to your financial planners, hopefully in the past, and continue to. You have the sale of a home, often going to be important if you're in those CCRCs, right? If that, where you need that big lump sum and you're going to need to move. In your rental communities, think about it this way, where you're only paying on average $10,000 for a community fee. You may not have to do that. Okay, so just an example there. Long-term care insurance, how many folks have long-term care? Right, okay, good. So communities are used to working with long-term care providers. Every policy is different. You want to speak to your financial planning team about what you have, but they will pay a portion of assisted living, obviously in-home care as well, certainly memory care. So it's a good offset to what you would be charged in a private pay situation. Okay, so super, super important to think about that. And that'll mean communities will have to provide documents that you'll be able to turn into your long-term care provider, but they're used to doing that. Of course, your pensions, investment, Social Security. I'm going to talk to you about a program for veterans. Any veterans in the room? Okay. Thank you for your service. We'll talk a little bit about that, or if you know veterans in terms of a benefit that's specifically for them. Contributions for family members is really, really important to us that we stay in our lane. We're not financial advisors, right? But folks ask us all the time, how do I know I'm not going to run out of money? You talk to your financial advisor who can model exactly what these expenses are going to be and to be able to project what you have budget to do so that you don't have that situation happen. So always, please have those conversations. Let's see, get it right. Aid and attendance. So you may know a veteran, or if you are a veteran, this is a program provided by the VA. For folks who have either served at least 90 days at a period of active duty and at least 1 day during a period of war. It's anything other than a dishonorable discharge, of course. And the surviving spouse can also get these benefits as long as that person hasn't remarried someone who wasn't a veteran. Must acquire assistance. Christy talked about those ADLs, assisted bathing, dressing, grooming, etc. Must provide sort of need that. There are income and asset requirements. I don't have those here, but 65 years and older. And if you do qualify, it's between almost $1,500 and $2,700 a month. Now, this doesn't have to be just for our senior living communities. It also can be for in-home care. So if you know a veteran or are a veteran, there are a couple of organizations. This is going to be in that booklet that you have there that you can go to, enter in information that it asks. It'll tell you right away if you qualify or not. And what's great about it is, although the process can take multiple months to get in place, it's retroactive to the time that you actually apply. And great program. Lower cost options, and this varies by market, but there's one thing that I'm going to term auxiliary grant beds. Whenever a senior living community is being built, the municipality will say to that community, you need to have so many apartments that are for folks who are lower income. Okay, it's not apparent, no different, but they need to be available. These are often called auxiliary grant beds, and is criteria met. The problem there is, think about it this way, if they're often not available because they're being held for current residents who may have spent down a lot of their assets. Okay, but they are available. There's no list. Maryland does a great job of showing what communities have auxiliary grant beds. So you have to ask. Okay, so make sure you just ask. There are moderate and low income senior housing communities in most markets. Adult day centers, we're finding more and more of them. I'm on the board for one called Insight Memory Care in our market. And these are programs where it's built around, especially if you're dealing with a loved one that has memory impairment, where it's like a day program where you can take them. They're there for 6 hours a day, and the amount of care they're getting, activities and things that Christian talked about are so important when it comes to memory care, all being provided. It's great if you need time, because it's hard, taking care of someone with memory impairment, as well as just providing all the social connections there. So day programs, you want to look for those in market. Aging in place. Some folks, who wants to move out of their home, right? I mean, we love our home. So there's always a question about, well, what if I want to age in place? How much is that going to cost me? So there's two types of care if you think about aging in place. One is companion care, and that's something that's not a nurse, an individual that is coming to your home to help you with whatever. It could be food preparation, it could be taking you on, it's a companion, right? It could be help with those ADLs we talked about. And typically those are agencies that are going to have a minimum of so many hours, usually 4 hours when they're there, and so many days a week, usually 2 to 3. So there is something that you may say, I only need help with this, but there are going to be requirements about how much you need to employ them. That rate is between $35 and $38 an hour. If you need home health care, you had the skin wound, as you talked about, and you need a nurse or a wound specialist to come to the house. That's very different, where they're coming specifically for something there, and that's usually $80 to $90 an hour. Is anybody part of a neighborhood village? Do we know what that is? Okay, cool. So there are about 280 villages across the country. These are nonprofits, neighbors helping neighbors concept. I would have to do a little research to find out how many villages are in this area. There is a way to check, it's called Village to Village Network, to be able to find that. And basically you can join a village for less than $1,000 a year, and allows lots of social activities, that involve other members of the village, as well as you have needs, volunteers come and provide. Need somebody to change a light bulb, don't do it yourself, right? Need somebody to mow the garden, need somebody to take you to a doctor's appointment. All those things are available. So there are really, really great ways if you are aging in place, finding out if there are local villages and neighborhoods around you that you could take advantage of. So that would be Village Network here at the bottom, and you just enter in your zip code. All right. Okay, first of all, are there any questions so far about CCRCs and the things we've talked about?
I've got one question.
Please.
A relative worked at a nursing home.
Yep.
And it got into financial trouble.
Yep.
So he advised me when looking, said, the first thing you want to find out is the financial stability of the organization.
Yep.
how would you do that?
Yeah.
What questions would you ask? How
So-
would you put it?
Yeah, so the Bureau of Insurance is, it's a CCRC, I'm assuming, because.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Bureau of Insurance is gonna be the financial regulator of each, so you're gonna want to dig into that, you can get that
That's state.
information, it's state by state, right? They can pull financials from there. The disclosure agreement is always very important, it's a document that CCRCs have to provide, which will give that full detail. You can see ownership, information about it, you know, you can, there's the level of due diligence that you're gonna have to do on your own to be able to confirm. We're always looking at, you know, longevity in market, we're looking at ownership, we're looking at certainly financials. We're not, you know, again, we're not financial advisors, but to get a sense of really what that, how that particular organization has performed in market, because you're right, it is something to be concerned
Go
about.
ahead and Phelan, if I can just summarize, specifically what red flags would you be looking for when you're looking at these reports?
I would be looking for, one thing, I'm gonna get your opinion too, but I have a couple. One, I would be looking for occupancy. Okay, so think about, communities that are full or what an investor is gonna want. If occupancy is, if all of a sudden occupancy at a community is dropping, that means more folks are moving out versus moving in, which means that in a CCRC model, that's going to be a huge outlay of cash. Okay. I would also be looking at and asking, when I leave, for whatever reason I leave, how quickly is my money going to be paid back to my estate or to someone else? This is super, super important. This will give you a guideline if they're having a hon and not sure. In some cases, I have a very good friend who's in North Carolina, and it's been 5 years since her mother passed away. And she has not gotten that money back to her estate. And the reason is that contract basically said that payment wasn't to be made until they rented the apartment. So there's really no interest, right? So you're going to look for some of those clues. Communities should be great communities. We're going to say within 90 days or within 6 months, but they're having to manage funds, right? Essentially, is there enough money coming in that's going to help pay for the money going out? Anything else you add?
Yeah, the other thing you ought to look for is assets in reserve. How much money do they have in reserve? And by looking at that number and seeing, okay, what is the trend line been for that over the last 3 to 4 years, that'll give you a really good gauge.
Okay, and what about, is there anything we should be looking at as far as accreditation? Or rating by any kind of body?
There is an organization called CARF, C-A-R-F. It is, it's a private organization that will provide, it's not an oversight, but they dig into a lot of what should be provided. And so if a CCRC has a CARF designation, that's a positive thing. So C-A-R-F.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. Yes, ma'am.
You spoke about rental communities, and sometimes you may need skilled care. Do they normally have skilled care within their network, or how that?
So the question is, for those of you in the back couldn't hear it, is that rental communities, she was asking, if you need skilled care, then what do you do? So the assisted living communities have skilled providers they work with. They're not on site, but folks that they would recommend that they know have taken great care of their residents, and that's typically who they would refer you to.
Thank you.
You're done.
A lot of folks will ask us, you know, is it better to be in a CCRC versus a rental community? Or you hear the word rental, half of them may not be as good. That's not true. Okay, or nonprofits better than for-profits. They all can provide great care. So just you know, be aware of that. And the same thing for rental communities. And it depends is really it. You know, what do you want to do with your money? Do you want your money to go in a lump sum to a community and have certain, and that come back to your estate, a portion of that when you're to leave the community? Or do you want to be in a more flexible situation where you're going to have a little bit higher monthly rent, but you're going to have the opportunity to leave at any point, 30 days notice, somewhere else. Some folks say, I want to be close to my kids, or I want to stay here, but may want to move to my kid, near my kids. A rental community is a better option when it comes to that. Gives you a lot more flexibility. So It depends is the question. Yes, sir.
A little bit off topic, but with the 55 and over kind of places that are experiencing hedge fund buyouts and diminishing returns as far as the community life, is that kind of financial invasion working into this level?
Well, so when it comes to communities, they're typically, I'll give a typical, right? There's an ownership group that owns the real estate. And they then work with a provider who provides the care or oversight of the community. Sometimes the ownership of the real estate might be, investment groups. So if there's any shift in perhaps ownership, that's where it'll be. We're also always looking at that and watching them as well.
Is your question more about the 55+ communities versus the CCRC?
My experience with 55 plus is local news where an organization ran the 55 plus, developed it and so on, owned land. And I guess there was some care facility involved with it. And the whole thing was bought up and the hedge fund sold the land out from under, had the organization paying rent back for the landowner, whatever else. And then the whole thing just folded. Or the rentals, cost in residents skyrocket.
Yeah, so we haven't seen that a lot within the CCRCs, and it's, in the rental community, you're a little bit more protected from that, obviously, because you don't have that upfront fee invested. And then with rental communities, because you can move out with a 30-day notice, they are having to turn their business every month. And if they were to increase their rates so much, there's gonna be a mass exodus of folks leaving that community. So.
All right, we have plenty more time for more questions, but there's a document, it's in your folders. And it's a summary of what I'm going to talk about here in a second, which are, what are the questions I should ask if I'm touring a community? All right, and this is one I want you to, we can email it to you all as well, but it's super important. I'll tell you a little bit why we ask these. They're the easy ones. They're going to be, right, what care options are available as it relates to what you're going to need. Most folks are looking for communities where they're going to be able to age place. Tenure and experience of the staff. So there are two really, really important positions when it comes to a community. One is the executive director, sometimes called a general manager, as well as whoever is leading care. Okay? The head of care, director of wellness, they call them different things. If you don't have two folks in those roles and positions that really know what they're doing, have experience in the industry, and B, have previously run organizations that like these communities, then you can have a community that we often say are like fighting fires. Okay? So we're always digging into what are those, what is the experience of the executive director, head of wellness, as well as when you go into a great community, one thing you'll hear about is, so has been here 30 years, staff. Right? You're always looking at that. So transition of staff is something that attrition, right, is something you want to ask about, well, and retention of staff and what organizations are doing to be able to retain their staff. Super important. The occupancy percentage, like I talked about. So on average, if you take a brand new community, brand new, it's going to take 3 years for them to get to an occupancy rate, high 80s. Is ideal. And some of your CCRCs are 100%, right? They have waiting lists. Okay. What you don't want to see if you're asking about occupancy rate is, has it gone up and down? Or this community's been there a while and yet they're 70% occupied. Across the country, unless that, we looked at the other day, 87% occupancy is sort of what you're seeing across the country. So if anything less than that, and a community has been there a while, that's a red flag. Okay. We talked about the organizations that do state surveys. You can certainly get it online, but I can promise you that if a community has done well on its last state inspection and survey, everybody's going to know about it. If they don't know about it, that's a problem. Okay, that's sort of a red flag. But what we have seen, usually folks are very honest about how they've done. And it's not only how they've done, but how are they correcting that? And, just because a community did well 2 years ago, doesn't always mean it's doing well now. So really, really important to dig into the last state survey. Any deficiencies and then any plans of correction. Staffing ratio to caregivers and residents, something to look at. It's very different. It's different than skilled nursing. Skilled nursing, there's usually a 1 to 4 or some very small definitive number of staff to residents. That's not the case in senior living. That's a very flexible model that you're going to see. And then, again, we're talking about assisted living and memory care, where staff will be higher with the level of, depending on the level of acuity, memory care, as an example, but it will flow. It's a variable staffing model. However, you can usually look to 1 to 8, 1 to 10 staff to resident ratio whenever you're looking at assisted living and memory care. Call bell or agency staff. So within COVID, a lot of communities, in order to stay staffed, had to use outside agencies to do so. That's hard because agencies don't work for the community, right? So you have folks that are not necessarily delivering the same level of care. If a community today is using outside resources, that's a big red flag. So you want to make sure that the folks, are you using agency staff? Would be a big question. Or are these folks, senior staff members, fully employed? Call bell response time. So ask about this. So communities keep daily a log. They look at it the next day is how much time was it from when someone pressed the call bell or the pendant or made a call to when someone showed up. Okay, 7 minutes. That's your marker. Anything more than that, we're looking at problem areas. And we've been into some really, really nice communities where it's 15 and 20 minutes. And we were in front of a group the other day who said, my mom fell and she's in independent living, and it was 4 days before they wound up finding her, right, on the floor. So she was okay, but just know that call bell response time. And if folks don't know what that is, really dig into it. Tell them to get the answer to it. Okay. Type of activities, how many and what are they offered? The type of doctors that visit the community and how often. On-site physical occupational speech therapy. If within communities, what you're looking for is a community that actually has them on site versus having a home care agency that comes in. Does that make sense? Okay, because when it's on site, it's convenient. You can have 15-minute sessions versus 20-minute sessions. It's a much better way to go. So they usually are outsourced, but just to know, having them on site. Special diets, right? Low sodium, vegetarian, pescatarian, kosher. You want to dig into that. And then the thing I talked about staff retention is what type of training on an ongoing basis does the staff receive? Really, really important. Is it just when somebody shows up and it's all about company, or are they getting regularly with it? What is that? When additional costs are involved, typically, you're gonna have all your utilities covered. Usually there's basic cable, meals, as Christy talked about, but what else? Hair salon would be an extra. Sometimes premium cable channels are extra. Certainly you may have free transportation to an event, but you're gonna have to pay for your ticket. You want to dig into that about anything that's not covered. The annual increase and what you should expect. A community should be able to tell you over the last several years what has been their annual increase. Okay. You want to know that going in. 5% roughly in this market now. If it's much higher than that, that's a concern. And if they don't have a sister community, if they're brand new, they don't have another community in market where you can have a comparison. They have others across the country and you can get an idea. Any specials or promotions? Well, before that, as Chrissy talked about, when we were talking about that 2-person assist, okay, for needing 2 people, not all communities do it. So you want to ask, are there any circumstances where I might be required to move out? Okay. Big one. The last thing you want to do is to make this commitment to the community and then know that you have to then leave. Special prices and promotions. Senior living can be negotiated. If you have a community with a waiting list, it's unlikely that you're gonna be able to get concessions, just unlikely. Gotten some, but you know, we negotiate on behalf of our clients, so we do this all the time. However, in rental communities, that typically have availability from an occupancy standpoint, there's a lot to be negotiated. That could be in community fees, that could be in free months, that could be in rate locks, lots of things. So the most important thing is ask and to know that that can be the case, and so to dig into that a little bit. And finally, some states require what I call a disclosure document. And this would be to your question about financials, background of the company, ownership, number of years that they've been rate increases, what they've been over time, et cetera, about the leadership of the community. Some do not provide that. So ask if they have a disclosure agreement that you can have that would have all this information or something similar to that. Okay. How are you on questions to ask? Helpful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Take it with you. Like a copy and just take it with. All right. If you're gonna permit me for a minute, I just want to talk a little bit more about what we do. I'm not here to tell you what we do, but I just want to explain what we do and how we help folks if you ever are of need in our services. First of all, we provide always a free consultation. We never want you to make a decision without us having a direct dialogue about what we can do to help with whatever needs you have. Once you decide to engage with us, we do a comprehensive needs analysis. We're trying to understand, we're almost creating a scorecard. We're doing the nice to haves, need to haves, must haves, geography, budget, all those things are going to go into it. And a nice to have, I want a more bucolic area versus a high rise, as an example. Or I want to make sure I have a 2-bedroom with a den and a living room. Okay, as an example. And budget really critical there. We then go to work on behalf of our clients. And by the way, we work across the country. 70% of our business is in the DC metro area, but we work everywhere. Philadelphia, we were in New York last week, in Long Island. We're going to California in a couple of weeks for clients. We do extensive research. We then take that scorecard that we're creating and we do the research that we've talked about. We're looking at licensing, we're looking at staffing, we're looking at all those sort of call bell response, all the things on your list. We're doing in advance for you to make sure that we're really vetting communities. And we do this in market, vetting those communities that we believe are going to be the most ideal for you to look at. We're not going to give you a list of 10. We're going to take it down to a list of 4 to 5, okay, that are the best. You're paying us to be the experts in the market and being evaluated, and that's what we do. Can we give you more? Sure, but it gets real. If you've been doing this, it gets real confusing real fast, right? So our success has always been that we're able to find communities within that short list for our clients. We provide this information. This is where it's going to be helpful for your financial planning team here, is when we are reviewing those and vetting those communities, we're going to provide this information back to you, along with not just why they were selected versus why others weren't, right? What do they look like? What are the key factors about these communities, floor plans, pictures? We're going to have a one-pager that we want you to take back to your team, financial planning team, that is, what does it cost today on independent living? What does that cost me today? What is it going to cost me for assisted living? What is it going to cost me for memory care? Super, super important information then to take back to your financial planning team here to say, help me with modeling this out so I can get a sense of what I need to be thinking about from a money standpoint. We then go back, once we review that with you, we'll then go back and market. We set up tours. We go with you. If you go to a CCRC today and you're touring your meeting with the sales staff, okay, nothing wrong with that, but there's about a 40% turnover within the sales function within senior living communities. So we bring to the table as well the executive director, the head of care, talking to the head of activities, those people that are going to be so important to ensuring that from a management oversight, you're going to get what you are paying for, essentially. We're going to make sure that happens. We then tour, as I mentioned, all these communities with you. When it comes to negotiating pricing, we do that on behalf of our clients. Coordination of transition services. If you make a decision and you need someone help next question or next worry people have is, what am I doing with my stuff? You know, that's usually the next biggest thing. So there are really great transition specialists in the market that can help with that. We help identify those that are in markets that might be of help. What's gonna fit? How am I gonna get it from here to there? You need an elder law attorney. You need help with, what am I missing?
Selling your home.
Selling your home. You just need ideas, whatever kind of research will be able to there for you to be able to identify the market. If you're moving to assisted living, not independent living, there should be a 30-day care plan meeting. That is a meeting with the staff of that community and the family to review the care that has been provided. We want to be at that meeting. Okay, but we want to make sure that what you are getting and being delivered is actually happening. And then we're the ongoing resource. We get called all the time from clients that here's what's happening at the community. Does this sound right? Or is there something that I need to elevate? Or can you help me with elevating this case? And we're always there to do it. So we're an ongoing resource. The way that we work from a financial standpoint, it's a one-time flat fee, which includes all hours that we spend with our clients. Christy talked about 45+ hours. That's on the low end. That's what we're doing. And that fee is $9,500. It's flat fee. And 90% of the cases, when we can negotiate with our clients, we get that, at least that amount of money and more back in concessions, just to give you an idea. So it's not hard for us to do. It's a 12-month time period to help you with your search. After that point, we know you so well that if it's 2 years out, it's just an hourly rate to continue to re-engage us. But it's, we are the company, so it's not hard to negotiate with us in terms of you need something else. So I want to give you this is I won't call it, this is Christy's money slide. All right, parting words of wisdom. No matter what you do, everything is okay till it isn't. Okay, have a plan. That's most important. And thank you for being here today, but have a plan. Don't wait till a crisis happens. Last place you want to make a decision about where you're going to go is in the emergency. We're in the room and you're going to go where you're going to go. Okay. Versus really having a chance to have advocacy into where you want to be. Waiting lists. You're looking at 2 years out and you want to be in CCRC. We got to figure out if there are waiting lists there and how does that work within CCRC. Many times they are refundable, but sometimes they're not. Without a plan, we talk about having agency decision. Research shows that isolation is the enemy of the brain. We talked about that, right? As older we get, usually our social circles shrink. And I saw this with my parents, right? As hard as things were for them, and as well as my dad was doing for my mom, it was just hard, right? To do that. That's enemy of the brain. There's plenty of research that says that without that social interaction, that we see folks a lot in memory decline. Okay. So, anything else? Yes.
Third party that's not here is insurers. My personal experience with my mother was that we waited until it was too late. I couldn't convince them. And when it came time to bring them out of the hospital into a rehab and try to find housing for them, of all the benevolent groups, the church groups and everything else, nobody would take their advantage plan insurance, but one for-profit institution who took anybody. And you can imagine what that situation is.
For sure. Yeah.
So review your insurance company.
That's a great point. That's a really, really great point. Other thoughts? So I guess one last comment here is we have not had a client that hasn't said we wish we'd done this sooner. I know it's hard. You know, that decision to make a decision is hard. We get it, but I'll tell you, once you start actually touring communities and being able to see what my life could be like, folks that make that decision really love it, and you deserve it, right? You've worked really hard in your life to find a place you want to be. If you want to be in another place. Other questions? Okay, so lots of information that we've left here. You've got your deck, take with you, that one pager, questions to ask, okay? And if we can be of any help at all, you don't have to employ us to do that. Just reach out. Okay, if you have any questions at all, happy to help.
Well, thank you. I met Ginger and Christy earlier this year and was really excited to have them come talk to us. I had two grandmothers, both have now are deceased. One grandmother was very proactive and thoughtful about this and had a very incredibly good experience and positive experience in her long-term care. And that's a good model. And I had another grandmother who waited and waited and refused to make any decisions until it was too late and the decisions had to be made for her. And of course, she did not end up where she wanted to be, and far from her community, far from her home, because the place she wanted to be was no longer available to her. So this is something that resonates with me. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've seen a lot of clients make really good decisions. A lot of clients, unfortunately, had to make had no good decisions available to them because they waited too long. So it's never too early to have these conversations, and was just really excited to have these guys here. I'm sure they'll be around here for a few minutes if you want to chat, but thank you so much for coming, and have it feels weird to say this, have a great summer because it's cold and rainy, but really have a great summer. We're after Memorial Day.
But it was helpful.